The visual novel genre is something that's been around for quite a long time, well over 20 years, though a lot of visual novels have just been coming out recently. Back when they first came out, not a lot of them came to the West for a variety of reasons. Popularity, publishers' willingness to do them, age content, the list goes on. But one of these visual novels from the 90s has finally come to the West for the first time with an official English translation, meaning that gamers don't have to go to those old PC fan translations for the game anymore. It took 23 years, an anime adaptation, a remake, and Spike Chunsoft, but here is my review of Yuno, a girl who chants love at the bound of the world for the Nintendo Switch. The story of Yuno is about Takuya, a university student who recently lost his father and has fallen behind in grades and attitude because of that. He currently lives with his stepmom and soon receives a package regarding his father's research. This introduces him to parallel and alternate realities, letting him explore relationships with many of the people from his life, letting him fall in love, but also digging up what happened with his dad and his research and trying to find a way back to his own reality. The story of Yuno is something that gets better the farther you go into it. The prologue of the game isn't terribly exciting outside of the character introductions, but each individual route basically tells two stories, which makes it pretty interesting. You've got the relationship that Takuya makes with the heroine of that route, but you also dig up a lot of information about what's really going on in the background, each individual route giving you bits and pieces of a puzzle that you put together by the time you unlock the true ending. Now, all of the different routes, and especially the true ending, are really good in terms of storytelling, but there is a bit of a problem, or at least a complaint that I have about it. I feel like a lot of the story conversations are really drawn out too much. I might think that because of how the game handles conversations, which I'll detail in the next section, but it feels like the pacing of a lot of the not so important conversations go by really slowly. When it comes to gameplay, this is a visual novel with a lot of exploration and puzzle elements. As you play through the game, you're going to be cycling through story scenes, of course, but you're also going to be moving through different areas and collecting items that you need for other routes. First, let's talk about the differences between the Yuno remake and the original from '96. First, let's talk about removed content, or as many other people would like to call it, censorship. The original Yuno is an H game that was filled with sex scenes on all of the routes. This version has all of those sex scenes removed, but not written around. They're still referenced, and the game doesn't try to make you think they did something else. You just don't get to see it happening. The other difference is 8-Bit Yuno's Great Adventure, which is a side-scrolling platform game that was included in pre-orders and day one editions of this game. Now let's start to dive into how you progress through this game. You've got your typical visual novel story stuff where you go through dialogue and you have auto skip and auto advance features, but there's a lot more to Yuno than that. When you get to a story scene, it acts out kind of like an interactable minigame. You've got a character on screen and you can interact with their mouth to actually talk to them, but you'll eventually get to a point where no new dialogue pops up until you start interacting with other things on screen like their clothing or something they're holding in their hands. Only then will more dialogue choices activate, allowing you to interact with their mouth again to continue the conversation. There's also a pretty in-depth item and jewel system that's used to traverse the different routes of the game. Once you clear the prologue, you get a device called a reflector that you can put jewels into as you find them on the routes. These jewels can be used to create save data at any point for you to go back to. The story branches off in dozens of places, even in single routes. So the jewel system is there for you to easily backtrack to get different events for each of the different routes, along with creating spots for you to jump from route to route when you need items and don't have them yet. And speaking of items, let's get into that. There are tons of branches in the story, and many of the proper endings for routes, or any endings for the routes, require you to have items you can find in other routes. Finding these items can be pretty tricky because they're often in optional out-of-the-way spots, and sometimes require items from even more routes to use in particular spots to find them. Like getting a rope from Mitsuki's route, backtracking through an earlier point of that route to use that rope to go down a well to get a silver medallion used for the very end of Mio's route. In other words, this is a visual novel that you absolutely need to follow a guide on if you don't want to end up repeating routes over and over and over again, trying really hard to find the right paths to find those optional items. But hey, on the bright side, even if you do follow a guide, there is plenty of content here. Across getting all of the main endings so I could unlock the true route and go through that, I'd easily put at least 40 hours into this game. It is yet another visual novel on the Switch with a ton of content. When it comes to presentation, this game looks really great. The remake has the anime art style, so some people might miss the old art style, the 96 version of the game, but everything looks crisp, incredibly detailed, and even the CG still artwork has animation to it, letting the eyes and lips of each character move as they look at you and start talking. Now, performance I have no complaints with, so let's go right into battery life. The original model has a battery range of 4 hours and 17 minutes to 6 hours and 20 minutes. On the Lite, we get a battery range of 4 hours and 21 minutes, up to 7 hours and 3 minutes. And on the V2 or Redbox model, we get a battery range of 6 hours and 7 minutes, up to 9 hours and 9 minutes. Now in conclusion, Yuno is a visual novel that a lot of people have wanted an official translation for over 20 years now. Now, the downside, a lot of the more minor scenes are really drawn out, the item and jewel system makes it a very confusing game to play without a guide, and we've got a little bit of removed content in the sex scenes being removed. But if you can find a good guide and don't mind not seeing the sex scenes, this is a really good visual novel, especially towards the end. Reviews to Go rates Yuno for the Nintendo Switch a 7 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.